I love a Jordan B. Peterson quote that paintings are layers of time. And that's what, a painting that really comes to life.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 146 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the featured Artist of the Month in the Loft for July. Please welcome Jennifer McGill. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview local business owners, comedians, singers, and more. I dive into their backstory to find out how they got where they are, what are some of the tips for you to do the same, and find out where they are going. Tune in every week as I interview more of the people you see every day. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. Hey, I hope your guys' week is going well. It's finally sunny here on Camano Island. So I'm recording this, and it's currently pretty clear skies. There's just some clouds in the sky. So that's good. That's been a good change. On another note of that, this week has been another kind of rough week. Had a few different things happen this week that have me down just a little bit. Again, this podcast was not recorded during this time, so that's good. Good news there. Yeah, so been a little bit of a rough week. Had a good Father's Day and everything. Just, fun times in life. So on top of that, if you have not already followed me at the Camano Voice on Instagram, be sure to do so. I'm trying to post 3 times a week. I don't know if I'm hitting that, but I'm trying to post little things throughout the week, just kind of fun little things I found. I've got a fun video coming up here. It's not that exciting or mind-blowing or anything. It was a weird occurrence that happened at my house. So be sure to watch your stories for that. Although after I've recorded this and it comes out next week, that story will be gone. But perhaps I'll post it multiple times so you guys can see it. Anyways, so today I'm interviewing Jennifer McGill, who is the featured artist of the month in the Loft for the month of July in 2022, if you're listening to this in the future. So be sure to, as always, stop by the Loft to check out her work. She does a fantastic job. She is from the Skagit Valley, so same area that I am hailing from currently. And does amazing work, and was actually the featured artist for this last year's Tulip Festival, which is a huge honor. When you know how big the Tulip Festival is in this area and how world-renowned it is, to be selected as that featured artist is just incredible. So she got to do all of that, and she just does really neat work. Her combination of vintage and flowers and everything looks so good. So be sure to check out her. She is in the Loft through the month of July, so be sure to do that. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jennifer McGill. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the featured artist of the month for July. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer McGill.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brandon. This is great.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Jennifer.
Oh, where to begin? Let's see. So you asked me where I grew up, and that is a great question because I spent half my time between Napa, California, and Decatur, Illinois.
Okay.
And I spent almost equal time in both states, about 12 years in each state.
Okay.
And I will expand on that a little bit because it's pertinent to my background in art.
Yeah.
So I was actually born in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And my mom and my bio dad were divorced when I was about 18 months old.
Okay.
And I have no memory of him whatsoever. He was really not part of my life after I was a baby.
Okay.
So my mom decided the best thing for us was to move back to Napa from LA, which is her hometown in Napa. That's where she grew up and graduated from high school and still had lots of friends there. And so we moved back to Napa. And she was a nurse, a registered nurse at the hospital, and we lived in a little apartment and had a little life together and as just mommy and daughter. And And then some years later, I was probably 6 or 7, my mom, she's a pretty adventurous gal, and she took flying lessons. She really wanted to learn how to fly.
Okay. Yeah.
And this really handsome pilot that she met, that was her flight instructor, she fell in love with and married, and he became my dad, and he adopted me. So he's my adoptive father, but I think of him as my true dad because he loved me and fed and clothed me and helped put me through school, and was a dad for all intents and purposes. So, and he obviously he was a professional pilot, and so with a pilot came a lot of adventure and interesting moves and things, and that's how we ended up in Decatur. Was that my dad took a job flying for a corporation, so he was flying between there and Chicago, Decatur and Chicago quite often. And it was really great because even though he was a pilot, he was home for dinner, and we had what felt like normal family stuff.
Yeah.
For the beginning of my life as now that we were a nuclear family.
Yeah.
So far, up to today, I've lived in 5 different states.
Okay.
I've lived in 20 different houses, apartments, and condos. So I consider myself a bit of a gypsy soul, a Rolling Stone. But my longest stretch of living in one place is actually here in the Northwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, it's funny when my parents, I kind of followed my parents out here, and I just fell in love with the area. And so here I've been for, almost better part of 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And when I became a mom, I decided I was going to just stay put, even though I could have that adventurous life and take kids places, but it made more sense to allow them to have one space that they could call home and have friends that they could, call back to and anytime. In fact, both my kids have friends now that, like my oldest son has friends that he lives with that he's known since elementary school.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so there's a real nice connection.
Yeah. Very cool. So, so through growing up and everything, was art something that at a very young age, I mean, you were moving around, you were kind of in different schools, I'm assuming. Was that something that you took to pretty early on?
Absolutely. For as long as I can remember.
Okay.
Yeah. From one of my earliest childhood memories is being out on the playground, and I drew a profile picture of a little friend of mine on the pavement, and my teacher gave it to my mom and said, "Look at this. This is pretty incredible for, a little 5-year-old child,
Wow.
trying to draw people."
Yeah.
So I've always had cartooning books, how to draw animals. Like I always in my free time was doodling, or in my bedroom with pieces of paper and drawing. That was everything to me. And in fact, I went to what I always refer to as a hippie school up until yes, I did, up until about 3rd grade. And it was more like a Montessori school where you learn at your own pace.
Okay.
And so I had a group of kids there, and it was learn in your own pace. And I took to learning. I absolutely love learning. I still do.
Yeah.
Reading and writing, and I did all kinds of art and studied anatomy books and did a lot of things to help my drawing along.
Yeah.
And so, that hippie school, I was a pink and a blue. I was not in grades of any kind.
Okay.
And so, I know, it sounds weird. But when my mom and dad got married, my dad, he's a Minnesota farm boy.
Yeah.
And he says, I really, really want for her to have a more structured life and to have maybe some learning that is more like what normal social norms, that's the best way to put it. And so, when they had me to put me into school, they had to have something to go from. So I tested into a grade above where I was at that point in time. I figured I could maybe color in the lines a little better than everybody else, but I moved into the 3rd grade.
Yeah.
And that was my first normal public school experience.
Okay.
So with a classroom setting.
Yeah.
And we moved around a little bit from there. I went to a bunch of different elementary schools in California, but then when we finally moved to Illinois, that's where I was in one middle school and then finally into high school.
Yeah. Well, and my background is I grew up in homeschool, so
oh yeah,
that was the common question. Is everyone's like, "Oh, what grade are you in?" I'm like, "I have no idea. I'm doing 5th grade like math, but I'm in like 2nd grade this and like 4th grade like." You're just all over the board because you're depending on your strengths and like
exactly
how quickly your mom or teachers can kind of keep you going forward. It's like you're all over the place, and that's how most humans are. They excel in a few areas and they're behind in a few areas, but when you're just thrown into this box of like, well, you're going to be at 5th grade for everything across the board, you start falling behind in some areas, and so.
Yeah,
I get that. Even though it wasn't colors and
yeah.
things that I was in,
they didn't group you.
I never had a clue what grade I was technically in, and even now, like our daughters are homeschooled. Our oldest son is going to public school, and then our youngest son is homeschooled as well. So we're just kind of in this like I'm like, okay, I know what Peter's in because he actually has a classroom that like is assigned, but everyone else, I'm like, I don't know what they're technically at right now.
Yeah.
So.
And that's fun. I think that. And right now in this day and age, that's a great thing to have, some they can move autonomously in their environment to learn, but then you're structured enough that you know exactly what they're learning.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Very cool. So so you were introduced to arts fairly young and showed a knack for it. As you got into high school, did you focus in more on that?
Yes. And I always did it for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in high school, I did things like I created a backdrop for homecoming. If you're ever familiar with the band Journey, the popular song at that time was Faithfully.
Okay.
So did this big Forever Yours Faithfully with the rose in the middle. It was kind of cheesy, but kind of cool at the same time.
Cool.
It's in the yearbook. And I didn't do it all by my onesie. I had friends that we got together and worked on it. But it was absolutely a project that launched me into gaining confidence about working and how to plan a project.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And then I also did a school directory cover that was voted on. It was really fun that it got chosen. And then when I had moved to Decatur, my mom and dad really wanted me to be more involved in making friends and getting assimilated. And so I joined an art group, and they were teaching like drawing on the right side of the brain, that sort of thing. And there was a contest for a fashion show poster design. And so I won that. I was stunned. I was just a kid, and beat out some adults on that. So that was really fun. So these sort of things kind of helped build my confidence.
Yeah.
And I did take art in high school. Mm-hmm. But my teacher, I just didn't feel very challenged by my teacher.
Okay.
It was the 80s, and I think she was just, kind of floating along in her teaching career. I don't know, God bless her, but she, was the kind of teacher that come to class, and if she would announce to the class that she forgot her eyeliner. And does anyone in class have some extra eyeliner? What are we learning? Be sure to bring plenty of eyeliner. So I decided at that point, I wasn't getting a lot out of my high school art class, so mom and dad suggested that maybe I take a class at the community college where I might be more challenged. Now, mind you, this is way before Running Start or anything like that, but it makes sense looking back now because I was in with like-minded people that were more serious about drawing.
Yeah.
And I learned so much, structured activity and just one thing, building block principles for line and shape and shadow.
Yeah.
And reflected light and drawing the human figure. All those things came into play in that community college setting.
Yeah.
So, at the tender age of 17, I was, doing something that most kids wouldn't have gotten to for at least a couple more years.
Yeah.
So
in that then, you've mentioned drawing like graphite and stuff. Is that what your main focus was kind of on that, not so much in the painting realm at the time?
no, actually, graphics was not even on my radar.
Oh, okay.
Even though that did end up being a bulk of my career thus far. I really enjoyed painting.
Yeah.
I had started taking a watercolor class. I worked at a frame shop when I was in high school.
Okay.
That was my high school job. And so I took a painting class outside of school and at the frame shop. And I fell in love with that. So I continued with watercolor and drawing, and I love drawing. Always have. It's just a foundational skill set for all things, no matter what you're doing in art. It really is.
Yeah. When you're doing, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but like maybe even at this time, when you were doing watercolor, would you start with kind of sketching it out first and then go to watercolor?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. I absolutely did. And it wasn't until college that I really got some training and figured out how to make the paint work for me rather than being behind, because watercolor is unforgiving.
Yes.
It definitely I would spend many, many hours planning things out, how I was going to do things. And always kind of my goal was always never to come back over an area more than a few times.
Okay.
Yeah, when I painted, but always starting out fairly abstract and then working to something more finished in my center of interest. And that's really an academy thing, but I digress. So I did want to share that with the community college class and then being confident in my high school class, there was another event that happened, and my mom shared with me, and she had not really talked much with me about my biological dad. And somewhere along senior year, when I was kind of I wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I didn't, art was fun, but I didn't know if that was really what I wanted to do in a career setting.
Yeah.
And she told me that he was an artist.
Okay.
He was a commercial artist. He did architectural rendering. And I was really blown away. She was not forthcoming about her life with him very much.
Yeah.
She felt it was really private. And so what little I learned was taken with her to when she passed away. She just never told me much.
Yeah.
So I was pretty blown away. And I thought, well, maybe this is really part of my DNA. This is part of my heritage, who I am. And maybe I could do something with this for real. So that was a defining moment, and it really helped launch me into a personal journey into being an artist, at least in a commercial setting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I've heard so many different stories. So I'm actually adopted as well. And I've heard so many stories of adoptees or, I knew another friend that was, again, he was, their parents split pretty young, so he never really met his dad. And years later, he had been working as an engineer, and years later actually did find out who his dad was and connected with him. And after meeting him was like, oh, he's also an engineer. He's got the same. So it's just weird. And then similar stories, other stories that I've heard. It's just fascinating that these people who never met their biological parents, if they meet them again or find out later on, there's these innate characteristics that they got from them despite never meeting them.
It's so true. And I really can see that even as I've learned more about him since, that sort of a moire, an overlay of certainly my personality, but there are certain things that I do or have a knack for or an interest in,
Yeah.
like say Scandinavian design and architecture.
Yeah.
And that's primarily what he was interested in rendering, was all these clean lines. And it's strange to me, like there's certain, and he had a knack for birds and drawing color. He was really an expert in color, and he also did signage and things, and all stuff that, it's funny, that's stuff that I've done and without knowing anything about him.
Yeah.
That I went in that direction. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So then, as you were ending high school, and you had already taken some community college classes, what kind of finally led you to decide what you wanted to do at college and kind of beyond?
So I went to a 4-year university to start.
Okay.
And it's a school called Western Illinois University. And if I had to describe it, so because people out west here would know, it's something like, it's a little bit like WSU in terms of it's on the other side of the state.
Yep.
It's in a little tiny town, and nothing goes on except the college. So, my first year was all about freedom and bad decisions. That was my first year. I really had a lot of fun. Yeah. Did a lot of research and what kids do first year of college. And they also gave me a tuition grant waiver for art. So it was kind of a nice segue into university setting. But after I got there and was there for a year, I thought, this really is what I want to do. So why not just go to a trade school where I'm really going to devote and focus on that one thing.
Yeah.
And skip the math and the science and all that other stuff because it's not going to be part of my story later on. So, and so from there I transferred to the Art Institute of Chicago. And I'm going to try to do my best to sandwich compliments with a criticism in the middle.
Okay.
So it comes with a great reputation, and it really is an amazing school. It's right in downtown Chicago, and it is huge. There are reputable instructors, and it's a really interesting place. Lots of activities for painting and printmaking and a couple of things that I did while I was there.
Yeah.
Kind of the bad part is it was based a lot on postmodernist influence. Okay. So the classes were incredibly unstructured. And not that you would think that might be a bad thing, but there wasn't really much being taught. It was a little bit of the baby went out with the bathwater on traditional teaching. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I come into class, and one of my teachers, the minute I got to class, he'd leave for 30, 45 minutes, go get a cup of coffee, come back and just mill around and look at things. Set things up for life drawing. And then another class I had life drawing, but there was no anatomy being taught, no structure as to how to draw the human form. So it was so unstructured.
Yeah.
Another class, the first day of class, I went in, and it was an audio-visual class. It was an extracurricular, and she had us picking debris up off the floor. My dad was pissed. He was like, "There's a vacuum in the corner. We are paying for that." So, this is just sort of the weird thing. But I did have a wonderful printmaking class that I learned to levigate a stone and go through the whole printmaking process. Yeah. And the other really cool thing that was there was the museum.
Okay.
There's no substitute for being able to go look at master's work in real life.
Yeah.
And so anytime I got really frustrated with my classes, I'd skip class and go to the museum and sit in front of a favorite master's piece, whether that be, Monet or Rembrandt or one of those, and just sit and study.
Yeah.
Just look and get really close. Like, how did they layer that? How did they draw that? And just mesmerized by the incredible detail and I would say it's complicated. You know, it's a complicated. I love a Jordan B. Peterson quote that paintings are layers of time, and that's what, you know, a painting that really comes to life. It's showing layers of time, and I would only hope that I get a little bit of that in anything I paint in the future. So I was there at the Art Institute for a couple of years, and I fell out of love with that place pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I transferred across the street to a place called the American Academy of Art in Chicago. And I thought it was very appropriate that I was 16 floors up looking down on the Art Institute from there. And it was everything the Art Institute wasn't. I had fundamentals classes. I learned line, shape, and form once again.
Yeah.
And in my anatomy class, we started with bone structure and then drew muscle structure over that, and then the actual human form. So in every life drawing class, you had building block principles.
Yeah.
And in every class, you had, hey, here's watercolor. You start monochromatically. Let's learn how to control what you can in the paint.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely the foundation of everything I know today thus far with
Very
art.
cool.
Yeah. And art is always a learning process. I'm still a work in progress, but it definitely was the fundamentals which launched me into having a really great portfolio.
Yeah.
Learning how to be a professional, how to put a resume together that if they're looking for an artist, what do you need?
Yeah.
How does your work need to be presented? And all that was super important. So that was fabulous. And I've gone back and visited the American Academy of Art, and it's a great school.
Nice.
Tremendous. Yeah, still in touch with my teachers. And
very
it's a
cool.
Great place. Yeah.
Awesome. So where did you go upon graduating from there?
So after my 5-year plan, because that was I had that awesome portfolio with zero experience, and right about this time, I remind you, my dad was a pilot, so he and my mom and my sister moved overseas.
Okay.
About that time, and I was trying to decide: do I want to stay here, or do I want to? Because I was invited to go with. I could go with them, but I decided not to.
Okay.
I really was worried. Like, this is 1990. Jobs were very competitive, and I was very concerned about, well, what do I do if I have a hole on my resume for 2 years? I just was a little freaked out. So I was like, I think I'm going to stay here and get a job and be the responsible person now. Yeah. So
where were they moving?
They went to Australia.
Okay.
Cairns, Australia, which is on the northeast corner. So it's up in the tropical area right off the Great Barrier Reef.
Wow.
And my parents, they, of course, I got to go visit.
Yes.
So I did get to visit Australia. But I had really wanted, since they were only probably there for 2 years on a 2-year visa, I wanted to go scuba diving. So while I was in Chicago, I took scuba diving lessons, became a certified diver, and went scuba diving off the Great Barrier Reef.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, saw an eel, and it's so cool. Like, underwater life is so different from above water life as an artist and as a human on land. Your entire view of the world is horizontal. You look at things in a landscape fashion. Yeah. But underwater, everything is vertical. So things grow up towards the light. Yeah. And so there would be these curtains of fishes, like all these tropical fishes. Like, I expected to see something, like SpongeBob, where, things are kind of moving along underwater. No, it's these huge, tall columns of fishes and sea life. And it's just very cool. I just amazing. And I'm so glad I did it when I did it, because how many times do you get to go to Australia. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so that was really fun. But yes, I decided to stay, and my very first job was at a paper cup company.
Okay.
Yeah. Wah, wah. Sorry, kids. Yeah, very unromantic, very practical. And my job had this great portfolio, and they said, "Hey, kid, we'll train you." So I sat at a light table every day, and this was before computers. So everything that you did for printing was done film. They took pictures
Yeah.
with the camera. They created film and then a plate
Wow.
with an emulsion. So it's all kind of old, very old school.
Yeah.
Well, my job was to sit at a light table and fill in pinholes of light
Wow.
on the film. So I had a paintbrush in my hand, which is the closest thing to art that I could possibly draw from that. And I filled in the little pinholes of light with paint, like a rust-colored paint.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was so unbelievable. Like I was looking for my exit at any point possible. And here's what I would recommend to any kid getting out of school is to take these moments, like say you get a really unsexy job, like that, is that you can learn something
Yeah.
and be humble and just find something in it that you can hang on to.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things where it's good to go and learn how to interact with coworkers and
Yeah.
and I learned how to one weird skill set that I learned how to do was to strip film together.
Okay.
I'm not talking dirty. It's not
Like, oh. No, I was kidding.
I strip film together, and it's interesting that is a skill that I still use today, which is to basically seamlessly bond two pieces of something together so that you have a uniform, long something
Yeah.
that couldn't be done with a regular piece of paper or film.
Yeah.
So the whole time I was there, I was looking for another job, and I was moonlighting. So I was freelancing with a company called Enesco.
Okay.
And that's another thing I would highly recommend to any student coming out of school is that if you take a job and you don't like it, or even if you do like it, always be looking for a way that you can optimize, implement, learn something, do self-assignment. If you're not getting the assignment you want out of your projects at work,
Yeah.
assign yourself something. Do it on your own time.
Yeah.
And I promise that will go so far, because every job I ever got, the next job, was because I gave myself a self-assignment.
Okay.
Yeah, it really is true.
Yeah. Well,
So-
and I think something that actually speaking with my brother-in-law, actually this is before I started, like when I was still an engineer working in kind of professional world. One of the things he would always tell me when we were talking was, he's like, in all the jobs and things that I've done, like I'm just building experiences. And if you think of your life as just building skill sets, and that you're like whatever you learn at any job, regardless of what level of work you're doing, there's always something you can learn. And then when you leave that job, you take that with you, and no one gets to take
Exactly.
that away from you. And it was always interesting to me when I would talk to him, because he worked some strange jobs and some like not glamorous jobs, and I was like, so were you like during this time when you were working there, were you just like just waiting for the next thing or something like that? And he's like, well, yes, I was looking, but I was also learning what I could during those time periods, and it kind of gave me a new outlook on like how I see work and projects and experiences. Like all these different things make you a little bit stronger, a little bit better, and you get to always take that with you, regardless of what you
Exactly.
end
It
up doing.
creates opportunities.
Yeah.
There was a great book I read in the early 2000s called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes. Yeah.
And that is that same kind of principle in terms of, your cheese is going to move. So what are you going to do to get to the cheese? And it was sort of a whole fable about a little mouse and, having his running shoes around his neck at all times. But that's really, in a human sense to be prepared.
Yeah.
To be ready to run, to be ready to go find where that cheese is going to get moved, and to hopefully, plan your own cheese, like get the job you maybe really would like to have. So let's see. So let's see. After the paper cup company, I did that freelancing with Enesco, and that's really where my career began.
Okay.
That was my first, I would say, real job. I was freelancing, trying to get in as an illustrator.
Okay.
Because that was what my degree was. I got a degree in illustration. And they said, Jennifer, we really like your work, but right now all we have is a graphic design job.
Okay.
Graphic arts. And I said, I'll do it. Because I knew that I would have opportunities within the company to do some illustration work. It wouldn't be my primary focus, but at least I'd have some opportunities. And boy, am I ever glad I just took that job, because it ended up being so fun. I got opportunities to illustrate like gift plates, spot illustrations. I always had, like say, my door. I go down to the illustration department and say, do you have anything? Can I do anything? Even on my free time, like, could I do something? And one time, I had a friend who hired me to do some hand-painted lettering. So it was some lettering, some words that looked like quilted fabric.
Okay.
Because everything's kind of cutesy. Enesco's a giftware company, and there's lots.
Okay.
If you haven't heard of Enesco, you've probably heard of Precious Moments.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and then they had licensed products as well, like Garfield and Marvel and the baseball, sports, all sorts of things that they'd made collectible stuff for merchandising.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was doing some hand-painted lettering and to make a little extra money and to get got to do some illustration work. And so I had to do it pretty quick. It was like a one-night, overnight deal.
Oh,
so
wow.
I did it very quick. I painted it very quickly. It looked great. I leaned my painting up against the wall.
Oh, no.
I know. I had a dog. When I woke up the next day, it looked like someone had taken a broad brush over the whole thing and, washed marks through the whole thing. And I realized as I rubbed my eyes, I couldn't believe what I saw. And my dog had licked my painting.
Oh, no.
Yes. Like my dog actually ate my homework.
Uh-huh.
And I had to go back, kind of hat in hand, oh, please let me have another day. I can't believe it. My dog destroyed this. And I did get it done. He did keep me on, but I got to do the work twice.
Yes.
And I did it twice as fast.
There we go.
But yeah, that was one of my anecdotes from Enesco. But it was a cool job. In my department, since I was doing a lot of the licensed products, we didn't really have an office per se, so we were in a portable unit that was down in the warehouse.
Okay.
So we were kind of the little stepchild out in the out in the warehouse. But you'd open that door and the music would be going and the coffee's on and everybody's having a good time, and it was just really fun. I learned about how to art direct a photo shoot and how to lay out typesetting. And in fact, typesetting, because like I say, there weren't really computers at the moment right then, that typesetting was in a little closet, like a furnace-sized closet with a machine that was about the size of a furnace with a little lady that was sitting there typing away. You give her your copy that you want to have printed.
Yeah.
And she spits it out on the machine.
Yeah.
And hands it back to you, and then you run to the production department and have them put it all together.
Okay.
So, this is a pre-computer. That's a lot of jobs that happen in the box now.
Yeah. Very cool.
Which, interestingly enough, that did happen. When I got out of school, my dad was a computer nut. He loved computers. Mm-hmm. He's the type of guy that would go to Radio Shack and buy a kit. Mm-hmm. And he actually bought a kit to build a computer.
Okay.
So this was like early 70s.
Yeah.
And with the dot matrix printer and all that. And and he programmed it to do your biorhythms, in 1970s things. But anyway, I was encouraged early on by my dad. Jen, you really got to learn to use the computer.
Yeah.
And I was like, Dad, no. There is no art and computers. That isn't going to be compatible in my world.
Yeah.
And he was like, but look. And he shows me a mouse and a pad, and the mouse is, like, it's like holding a block of soap,
Yeah.
And he's like, moves it 6 or 8 inches, and on screen you see a line form about 2-3 seconds later.
Yes.
And I was like, no, Dad, that's not going to work. That is too slow.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no, I'm not going to do computer. Well,
Yeah.
Guess what? Computer landed on my desk at an ESCO because I was
Okay.
in graphic arts.
Yeah.
And I had never taken a computer class in my life at that point. And they paid for all my training for Photoshop and Illustrator, and at that time was Cork Express.
Wow.
And I learned.
Yeah.
I said, I guess I'm going to learn this. This is on my desk now.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned. I never was educated in any form of it. But it's amazing that one item changed everything. That eliminated probably 6 jobs
Yeah.
in the field right there. That
Yeah.
little typesetting lady, the production department, and
Yeah.
eventually the film, everything. I mean, it's like now we've on demand printing, for heaven's sakes. So,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Or web, so you eliminate a lot of printing right there.
Yeah.
But I learned so much there, and that was just such a great place to start
Yeah.
and learn how things go from beginning to end. And I got to do a lot of great illustration projects. And during that time, Mom and Dad moved back from overseas, and they moved to Washington.
Okay.
And I flew out here to visit, and it was just one of those days. Like, they took me on a ferry ride,
Yes.
and the sun was setting behind the Space Needle and Mount Rainier, and I said, please, Mother, Father, may I come live with you? I'm about 23. I'm like, sure, come on out. So the rest, I actually drove out here in my Jeep, and when I got out here, I had a heck of a time finding a job.
Yeah. So then how did you end up finding work out here then?
I fell back on my framing experience, and I worked at a frame shop and gallery
Okay.
for a little while. And that's where I met my ex-husband.
Okay.
It was, we both worked at the same mall.
Okay.
And when we got married, we moved to Bellingham.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and he went to Western, and I took a job at a tool company, and it happened that tool company used Cork Express.
Okay.
So that worked out really well because I
Yeah.
got to use the skills from my previous job. And it was a really crazy place. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, great story. My first day of work at Grizzly, the guy had all kinds of swords and stuff on his wall, and it was
Okay.
his birthday. And he took out and he cut his cake with a sword. I'm just telling you, I took one step back and I thought, I don't know how long I'm going to be working here. Who cuts the cake with a sword?
Well,
That's
one way to do it.
my first day. I thought, this is crazy. So anyway, I worked there for about 8 months, and then I got a job at a design firm.
Okay.
And that was really fun because I got to really be more involved with clients and it wasn't just one product, it was all sorts of different services
Yeah.
and products at that point. And that was really fun, and I learned a lot there. And then, because creative work tends to, I think if you do 5 years at a creative job, that's a long time.
Yeah.
You get more of your creative muscle built moving from job to job if you can.
Yeah.
And so then the next job I took was at a place in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
And that that design firm, actually, they were the merchandisers for the Tulip Festival.
Okay.
So that's where I got introduced to the Tulip Festival, and I actually got to design the 1998 Tulip Festival poster.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Nice.
I think I'm the only person to design the poster as well as be on the artist, the featured artist. And I was the featured artist in 2021. But that wasn't my last job in Mount Vernon. I went to freelance work, and then I ended up moving to Idaho and Michigan.
Okay.
So I was 2 years away, but we came back.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back, we moved to Anacortes,
Okay.
Washington.
Yeah.
And I got a job with Bunnies by the Bay.
Really?
So I went
Okay.
back to sort of a giftware
Yeah.
type of thing. But it was great because I got hired to be an illustrator.
Okay.
And I felt like I was really living the dream. I mean, my goodness, I have a knack for cute and cuddly, and I, got to ride my bicycle to work, and I
Yeah.
had little kids, and we rode bicycles
Well, and
together.
Anacortes is kind of a magical, like, small... It's like Camano. It's that magical, like,
Yeah.
small-town feel. You never really have to go to the mainland unless you're, like, leaving to go do something. But, like, you pretty much have everything you need right there. So you just almost grow up, like, you're almost away from the real world.
It's so true,
Yeah.
so true. And it truly is a magical place. I still love and enjoy going back there because my kids went to school for some time over there, and
Yeah.
then we ended up in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
And I stayed at Bunnies by the Bay for about 7 years.
Okay.
And near the end, I was part of my self-assignments that I did was that I really wanted to design something dimensional. So I was doing trade booths displays and things where I was doing the artwork for the back of the display. And I
Okay.
had taken the time to produce artwork that was now in Photoshop versus hand painted because
Yep.
it was so much easier, just to erase something. You wanted a different color,
Yep.
anything. I mean, or we could just turn it into something else very easily, and it was already set up for the graphic arts person to handle at that point. So it worked out really well to optimize and implement using Photoshop for the artwork.
Yeah.
But I took it a step further, and I really wanted to do, like I say, some sort of three-dimensional design because we were designing for stores overseas.
Yeah.
And they have quite a few stores overseas in China, Singapore, all over, really all over.
Yeah.
And I got into Google SketchUp. I just
Yep.
was like, I can do it on my own, and I designed a kitchen and a store for Bunnies by the Bay, which neither came to fruition, but now I had a little something in my portfolio.
Yeah.
And I wanted more, and I interviewed at a place called Dylan Works
Okay.
in Mukilteo, and I got hired as their graphic arts person there, and they are a theming and fabrication company, but those three-dimensional things that I showed them really helped catapult me into a whole different world of three dimensions. So
Okay.
because they're theming and fabrication, everything is done and built in the shop down below. So
Yep.
I had to very quickly learn to draw in scale and elevations and create shop drawings, which I'd never seen one in my life.
Yeah.
I didn't know about drawing in scale
Yeah.
and how important that very thing would be, because those shop people get kind of ticked if you're
Yeah,
you're
coming
not
from
giving-
the engineering background, I have
Yeah.
experience with all of that. Yeah.
These damn artists. Yeah, so I really worked hard on learning how to read architectural renderings and how to at least I knew at least how to ask the right questions, and if I don't know how to do something, I'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Figure a way. And one of the best things I could recommend if someone was doing schooling for art and you just want to supplement your art career is go to lynda.com, Lynda.com. Now I haven't used it in a long time, but it really is they're not paying me to say this. That's what I used to help facilitate and fill in the gaps where I had some, needed some learning. So
Yeah.
that was a great supplement.
Yeah.
And everything I learned there really was, a crash course in 3D. And they just are fabulous. They do work all over the world.
Yeah.
And it was so fun. I did 21,000 square feet of wallpaper for a giant church down in Texas. I did play areas for Texas. I did some things for M&Ms overseas, and also just very cool. Just all kinds of really neat things.
Yeah.
They do a lot of work for Disney and other big companies that you wouldn't just know about them because they're a very cool 3-dimensional one-of-a-kind custom builds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so fun because it was play areas and things, and I get to test stuff out with the kids. And
Very
so
cool.
that was really fun.
Nice. So then you obviously you went through all these different like companies and stuff like that, and have continued to kind of evolve your art over time. And you mentioned that you worked with the Tulip Festival in the 80s, but how did you kind of re-link up with that later on?
Oh, yeah. So I had it, let me back up. When I was doing the Tulip Festival poster design, I met the poster artist. And the poster artist that year happened to be Alfred Courier.
Okay.
And we sat down and started chatting about the design, and then just started talking about life. And it ended up that he had been in Chicago 25 years earlier at the same school.
Okay.
We even studied under the same watercolor instructor,
Okay.
Irving Shapiro. But he, Irv was a little younger back then and a little older with me. And we just had so many things in common. And then we actually ended up being neighbors in Anacortes. And he's been an incredible, wonderful mentor and friend of mine for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
And he very much encouraged me to go for it. And it's taken a while. I didn't think it would be close to 25 years for me to get to the festival. It was 23, all said and done, between the 1998 and 2021. But it really was so much fun. And so I just kept going back. Like, it took from beginning to end for the festival, it was a 3-year process. From the time I initiated submission for it to fruition. Yeah. To actual festivals. So it was a long journey.
Yeah. And what was that for you? Because obviously there's a lot of work put into that. It's a very well-known, especially in this area, it is the festival. What was that like for you to finally achieve that?
Oh, other than my children, that was like one of my best life experiences, truly. It was just a blessing. I had envisioned it, but to have it really be me, and it was just an honor to be a part of it. Yeah. And I feel like I've just such a part of the community now, and I love meeting people, and it was just so much fun to feel that love all the time. People come and they're just, and especially because it was still pandemic with masks and everything, but I had a cool mask with my art on it. Okay. Festival art. And I set up every Friday at going between Roosengarde and the Tulip Town. Yep. And signing posters and getting to meet people, and it was just great. That is my jam, is being part of the community and being able to see people. They were so happy to be out and enjoying nature and the beauty of things, and it was amazing.
That's awesome.
So,
very cool. All right, and then what are I know we're actually recording this a little bit, a ways before your showing, but tell us a little bit about the pieces that you're going to be bringing to the Loft.
So I am bringing some, what I'm calling our floralscapes.
Okay.
So I've been wanting to do a series of flowers up close
Okay.
for 20 years. And I am excited to show them, to be able to show close-ups of interesting shapes, colors, unique composition. They're all realistic, but they're cropped in a unique, in an abstract way, like you might not at glance, you know instinctively, okay, that's a flower shape, but it's not super obvious because the flowers aren't in a vase or something. They're just, you're close up on them.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited it's been so much fun to just go with something organic. Like,
Yeah.
I love painting. I still love my trucks because that was what was on the festival poster.
Yeah.
And I have painted lots of trucks and cars and things. But I'm focusing on flowers right now, and I need to get it out of my system. Like, I go through ideas of things that I've wanted to do, and this is fun. So I've got some tulips and some chrysanthemums and
Oh, very cool.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah, flowers have some structure
Yeah.
and design to them. Yeah, so
Very cool. And your current medium, are you using a watercolor still, or are you doing oil, or what type of, what do you use?
good question. Let's see. I started using oils about 7 years ago. I had
Okay.
never painted with oil before.
Yeah.
When I was at the Academy of Art in Chicago, the oil painting room was dark and stinky, and when I'd walk by, the fumes would come out, and you get like a contact high from the terp. You're like, whoa, that is killing me. And but I love the results of oils in oil painting. The richness, the way you can go impasto with thick paint or thin paint and glazes. I mean, it has a flexibility to it that watercolor doesn't.
Yeah.
So I started using oils, but then I moved to water-soluble oils.
Okay.
So that was great fun because that just sort of married my two worlds
Yeah.
in a way. Not that they're watercolor, because they really aren't. They really are oil paint. I don't know what black magic they do to the paint to get it to be able to be dissolved in water, but it acts like the terp.
Okay.
And what's nice is that it doesn't smell. There's no chemical smell to it other than the really nice linseed oil smell.
Yeah.
But I liken it to maybe homogenized milk. You know, they whip it through some process that the molecules can be watered down with water, but still hold together in a way that it doesn't separate.
Yeah.
I don't
very cool.
like I say, black magic. I don't know how it does. I just know that it works.
Yeah.
And it makes it easy, especially if you're plein air painting. You just take a bottle of water with you. You don't, and you have a sip of water and pour some in your cup and dissolve your paint. It's great.
Yeah.
But that is what I've been using. I still love pen and ink.
Yeah.
I've always loved just black and white.
Yeah.
So, and I would love sometime to get back into printmaking because I did that in college at the Art Institute, and I really love printmaking. So one of these days. But I've been so really focused on painting. Any free time I have goes towards just developing painting right now.
Yeah.
I have my youngest son who is graduating from high school in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
I know, and he's my last baby.
Oh, no.
So he is the neatest kid. I'm so proud of him. He's going to go to WSU. Go Cougs.
Nice. Cool. That's
now,
where I went.
Now I'm a Coug mom. And, it's very exciting. And he's thinking about engineering.
Okay,
And,
very cool.
And neither of my sons is they're both engineering minded, like their dad. But they're both creative in their own way.
Yeah.
My oldest he took to music.
Okay.
He did drumming in high school, so he was in Jazz 1 at Mount Vernon High School and was an incredible performer. I was so proud of him. And my youngest is a really good gamer.
Yep.
I mean, most parents are like, don't play video games. That's a waste of your time. And I'm like, hey, if you can get straight A's and keep up your gaming, go for it.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. He
Yeah.
was like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah. That's great.
And he actually ended up winning money.
Yeah.
Yeah, he won a bunch of money playing Fortnite.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's a fascinating, I mean, the world has obviously changed so much in the last 10, 20 years, but it's very interesting following, because I've been a gamer ever since like you know, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, way back when. And I know there's Altaria and all that stuff before that, but like when I started doing video games, stuff like that, you know, it was just the little thing you would do at night. You know, it was something you do with your friends. And the evolution of games, though, over my just seeing it from going from that to what it is today, where there's these huge prize pools and these things. It's just crazy how things have changed and how really you can take, if you're willing to put in the work, and it means you sacrifice other things.
That's right.
You are able to make a life out of the work or what the thing that you enjoy the most.
So true.
So I try and apply that with my kids, is like, you know, I'm a little bit like, I'm not like the expert type people that dig to the nth degree of something when it comes to video games or anything that I've kind of done. I'm more of a generalist. And so when I talk with my son, he's like, I want to do video games. I'm like, okay, that means like if you're doing that, you need to learn how to be better at them. It's not just, I'm going to go play video games. It's, you're putting in the work to get better at them.
Right.
And he's like, oh, okay. So like, you know, when we're playing, sometimes we'll talk through that. But yeah, it's just fascinating. And then as you study those people that are excellent at that, you realize they could have been like, you know, Fortune 500 CEOs. They could have been like world-class artists. They just chose video games as their avenue.
So true. Yeah, I know. I think that's interesting, that something that when I was growing up, you know, with kind of Atari and even before that Pong, things that were, you know, very simplified games, you know, Pac-Man and Galaga, that was my jam, Galaga. Yes. It was, you know, it was single player. Well, now he's made friends all over the place.
Yeah.
Up and down the coast, because he plays with people from everywhere, and it's really kind of cool. You know, that's a totally different level of gaming that creates interaction, and I feel like that if you were fighting for inclusivity, that's a great way to do it, because there's something that a lot of kids could play. Yeah. Regardless of where they're at in life, you know, you don't need to be particularly tall or, you know, a certain kind of body shape, you know, or anything. It just requires you to be able to play the game. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. So,
very cool. Well, congratulations. That's obviously a very large transition. And
it is.
Yeah. Wish you the best as you make it through all of that.
I know. Yeah. So he leaves in August, and I keep telling him, we're going to turn your room into a naked bongo room, son. He's like, Mom. I think I've threatened him so much now he really believes me. It's like,
well, very cool. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
So this is going to sound weird. I haven't bought much, but the one thing I have added to my things that's so great is an LED toilet bowl light.
Okay.
I know. It's like under $10. It's the little things in life, you know?
Yes.
It's just enough light, not too much, to just get the job done, and it's life-changing. Like, it turns on the minute you step in the room, and it goes off after, I think, 2 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So it's
great.
Perfect. Yeah, it's the little things.
Yes. Well, yeah, especially if you're, you know, middle of the night and you're like, I don't want to blind myself, but I also want to make sure I hit the toilet.
Exactly.
Or sit down on the toilet and not miss it.
I would think if you have any boys, that'd be perfect.
Yeah. Very cool. Who is the most influential person outside of your family in your life?
I mentioned this person a little bit earlier, and that would be Alfred Currier. Yeah. He is a tremendous artist. Absolutely, he's a wonderful human being, super talented and very patient, and wonderful mentor and friend. Really, like sort of a father figure of art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, this is a fill in the blank question. I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
Live in a tiny house.
Okay.
And I think as a kid, I would have said Winnebago. because as we drove to Minnesota from Chicago area to, we passed a Winnebago factory, and I was
Yes.
like, oh, Mom, Dad, can't we get a Winnebago? So, and now they have Tiny House Nation where they build all these little custom homes on wheels, and
Yeah.
I'm obsessed, and now I look at it as more like financial freedom or freedom from material possessions, to live simply,
Yeah.
to give yourself time to go explore
Yeah.
and adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, now that you're almost an empty nester, it's your time to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Who is an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
I would recommend Mike Dillon from Dillon Works.
Okay.
The Mukilteo shop down there. They have a giant airplane on the outside of their building, a paper airplane, not a real airplane. And it's giant. And I think he maybe still lives here on Camano. And
okay.
Yeah. And he is the owner and operator of Dillon Works. And he used to be a Disney Imagineer, and he has one fascinating cat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I would tell myself, don't worry about boys so much. Seriously, why don't you just focus on what Jennifer needs and wants, and, focus on, I think I really wanted that part of my life figured out.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, it wasn't ever really always figured out.
Yeah.
I have a great husband now and everything, but it just is, I remember at the time I was just a little bit, I wished I would have not worried about that so much. I've always been the kind of person that worked super hard and burned the candle at both ends, and like I said, self-assignments and burning the midnight oil, and I've done that for 25, 30 years now. And I just wish at the time I had not worried about that.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Brandon. It's been a pleasure.
All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Jennifer McGill for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Be sure to follow me on the Insta at the Camano Voice, and see you guys next time.